the intention is to then, make it available so others that can't be here today can still appreciate our sharing.
And we are recording, so yep, there we go.
Yeah. Thank you, Edwin. So we're here today in an empathy cafe for Extinction Rebellion on Principle 5. We value reflecting and learning. And if you've not taken part in an empathy cafe or in an empathy circle yet, we will, go through the method so you have a bit of a guidance. So what we'll do is we'll run for about 2.5 hours. There's a link in the chat for you to add your details onto it if you want to be added there. And and also if you keep yourselves muted when you're not speaking, that might help with the background noise. So here for Principle 5. And so what's going to happen now is, because it's many of us today, we won't really do a round of intros. You'll do the intros in the breakout rooms when we get there. But today we've got Stuart Basdển that has offered kindly to just, sort of ease us into this Principle 5. And then after that, we will go over the method, and we'll go into breakout rooms, small rooms with a facilitator and 4 or 5 people. We'll do the empathy circle for about an hour and a half, where we'll all get an opportunity to speak and feel heard on our thoughts about it. And then we'll, after that, return back here into the main room, and there'll be a go around where everyone will be able to share what they're harvesting from that time in the circle, and we'll go about it that way. So welcome everyone, really happy to have you, and I'll pass on to Stuart.
Thank you, Marta, and thanks for inviting me and a chance to be here. So I got very excited. I've been very excited about this idea of going into the principles and values, and also the empathy cafe style. And when I saw that number 5, we value reflecting and learning, was available, I jumped at it because I think it's my favorite one. I think maybe a lot of the intros to Extinction Rebellion, you get to go through the principles value and pick your favorite. Well, this stood out to me, and as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it's the one that I tagged in my Facebook and have as my banner. But I think it's often overlooked in that it's not as sexy as many of the others, or it doesn't seem to be. But in this little intro now, I'm going to go into it, how reflection and learning, I think, is the basis of reality. And I'm really excited by that. But before that, I'll just say a few things. So first of all, I'll probably say quite a few things in this, with the idea that hopefully I'll say something which is new and that you haven't heard before. And the idea of that is we can do some learning. I didn't know all of this before this, but I had to look it up and research it. So just to go into the etymology of the words reflection and learning. Reflection is from re, which means back, and flexible is the sort of the other root word in Latin. So we've got sort of a bending back that happens in learning. There's a coming back, and then in the Empathy Cafe style itself, we get that chance to reflect back to each other, to bend back the words. It's not going to be exact representation of what was said, but it's going to be something similar that comes back to us and is slightly bent in that telling. Learning also has a really exciting etymological root, and it goes back to the Proto-Indo-Europeans, the sort of the culture that existed, that Sanskrit and all the European languages have a root in. And learning's root is in something like to find or follow a track. And it's also related to the word to last, in the sense of to go on existing. Something lasts, then it goes on existing. And so even in the etymology, we've got that there is a sort of something about the basis of existence that continues through learning. This principle and value was put into the 10 when we were thinking about it, and I was part of Rising Up before Extinction Rebellion, and Rising Up is the group that Extinction Rebellion emerged from. And when we were thinking about what the principles and values were and writing them, this one came in because of the importance of carrying humility. We don't know the answers, and we need to constantly revisit, review, reflect, and learn on things in order to change and improve and adapt. And one of the things that I've prioritized myself is to try and facilitate debriefs happening in sort of after actions and things like that. And then there's the feedback and learning culture group, which also does some of, sort of helps that happen. And sort of feedback systems being one of the key systems that help organizations and organisms to stay alive in this universe. If we don't get feedback, then, you know, we're not going to be sensitive to what's happening in the universe around us. Something that I'm hoping that we've gained feedback around, and I'm bringing it in now, is the idea of love bombing the police and telling, you know, there's the banner that went up saying XR and the police working together for a safer London. And then people experiencing the police as not creating safety, but creating danger for them, often racially marginalized communities. And how having a banner like that is harmful for our movement, because it means that we're unable to collaborate and we're not going to be trusted by other movements, especially movements with, you know, the majority of the world of non-white people in them. And so hopefully that's a learning that's happened, and we won't be making the same mistakes in the future. I also want to talk about the 3 demands. I think the 3 demands were absolutely perfect when they came out. But we're now at a point where they've done a lot of the work that they were intended to do, in sort of a rhetorical sense of moving the conversation on. And so maybe now is the time to reflect on these. Are these still the best things? Are they serving us? Is there something else that could serve us better? Whether it's 3 other demands, or whether it's moving on from the idea of demands to the idea of 3 directions that we want to move in collectively, politically, socially, economically, individually, all of it. But I mentioned earlier that reflection is part of the basis of reality. And for that, I'm going to talk a little bit into quantum physics. And this might scare you away, and don't worry if you don't get this at all, but hopefully something I say will come through here. And in quantum physics, there's this amazing understanding of the universe that we've got, where quantum particles, that's like the subatomic, the electrons and the protons, and in fact everything that makes up the universe is both, can appear as a particle and as a wave. And we've got the sort of, a wave is this thing where there's a probability, a waveform, that there's a probability the electron will appear in a particular place, but it could appear anywhere in the universe. And that's what electrons and other sort of subatomic particles do, is they manifest themselves into particular places for moments of time, interact with reality, with real things, whether it's photons or other elementary particles, and then they disappear into a waveform again as a possibility curve. And then Stephen Hawking has been talking more recently about, hey, this doesn't just apply to the quantum, this applies to the entire universe. What's the waveform of the entire universe? What's the waveform of our planet? What's the waveform of me? I've got a chance to appear. My waveform probably says there's a high chance of me appearing in Bristol in the UK, but I also might be appearing in London or in other places. And my waveform has this sort of tendency to it of where I'm going to be appearing. But the universe's tendency seems to be one of reflection. And it's the quantum physicists talk about reflection as the thing that turns a wave into a particle. It's through reflection that something comes into reality in a way that interacts in the universe around it. And there's something amazing to me that gets me really excited. That's why I'm talking about this here, about the idea that the universe has this tendency of self-reflection. And it's in the self-reflection that it manifests, that it becomes real, and something exists. And there's a direction of the universe towards awareness, and it's sort of through awareness that things self-reflect that reality happens. And that's how creation happens. So as a movement, as Extinction Rebellion, we're trying to do something that is new, so it gets into the news, new and news being related. The only way we're going to do that is by reflecting on what is happening in reality and finding something completely new that we can create, we can bring in something. And so in that way, we're all creators of the universe. We all have this ability to self-reflect. Now, I think the last thing I want to say is just to sort of talk about this time of coronavirus being, for many of us, a time of self-reflection. We've got this chance to interact with life and reality in a slightly different way. As a movement, we did the April Rebellion. It was new, it was exciting, and it sparked the imagination, and it changed the conversation across the globe. In October, we came back and we did similar things, but the police were wise to it. It was no longer a surprise of what was going to happen. They raided our warehouse the night before. We'd lost that element of surprise, of newness, of creating something that is completely unexpected. And so there's something of repetition becomes a weakness in some ways, and it's on us as a movement of radical life to say, what can we bring that is completely new, that's completely unexpected? And so that we're not going to just repeat the same thing over and over, in which case we won't be new, we won't be news, we won't change the conversation. So there's this like critical, vital importance to Extinction Rebellion, to take it seriously, that we need to reflect and we need to learn in order for us as a movement to be alive. And hopefully some of this lands in some way to some of you, and we'll go into some of your reflections to each other in the cafe now. Thanks.
Thank you so very much, Stu. Very, very appreciated. Beautiful ideas. We'll carry on for sure. Yeah. Now, before we go into the circle, some of you might be new to the method. Really, it's just a way of sharing in conversation that is a bit more structured, but is otherwise really simple. Lou, would you share with everyone just
Sure.
an overview of the method?
Thanks. Sure. Yeah. So as Marta said, the empathy circle is a way of having a conversation where everyone gets a chance to be heard, and it's different than just a normal conversation in that there's a bit of structure to it. Because what often happens in a quote normal conversation is, the people that have strong feelings or strong opinions tend to talk a lot, and people who are more introverted or more uncertain tend to speak less. And so the structure of the empathy circle provides mutuality for everyone to contribute and for everyone to feel that they are understood and heard. And so the way it works is people take turns speaking, and in this case we'll have timed turns. Are we going to do 4 minutes or 5 minutes or 3 minutes? Do you know what we're doing, Marta? 5? Okay, so there'll be a timekeeper and we'll do 5-minute turns. And before you start speaking, you select someone else in the circle to reflect back what they're hearing you say. Everyone in the circle listens, but one person is selected to reflect back their understanding of what the speaker is saying. And the speaker, you should pause periodically. Listen, speaking for 5 minutes would be very hard to reflect back everything. So the speaker should pause periodically, maybe after you get an idea or two out, pause to let the reflector reflect back what they're understanding. And if you don't do that, which, you know, people are not in the habit of doing that, so people forget to do that, the speaker can, the listener can put, or the reflector can put their hand up, or the facilitator can intervene and say, could you pause there and let the reflector reflect back what they're hearing. And the reflector's job is really just to reflect back what you understand the person is saying. Also in normal conversation, the kinds of responses a listener might do would be asking a question, or commenting affirmatively or negatively, or adding their own experience, or making a judgment of some kind. And when it's your turn to speak, when you become the speaker, you can do any of that. You can say anything you want when you're the speaker. But when you're the reflector, your job really is just to reflect back to the person what you understand they're saying, and even checking in with them. Is that right? Am I getting it right? And as the speaker, you know, if the person got part of it, you could say, well, you understood this part, but this was important to me and you didn't get that, or no, that really isn't what I was saying at all. Sometimes the reflector misses it completely. That's possible. And then you just try to say it to them again. And the facilitator's role also is to help that. You know, if the listener starts to do something other than just reflecting back, the facilitator will intervene. Or if someone's having a lot of difficulty actually hearing someone, the facilitator might then reflect back what they're hearing to help with that process. When the speaker is done speaking, or their 5 minutes are up, so you can speak for up to 5 minutes, you don't have to take that much time. But when you feel finished or your time is up and you get your last reflection and you feel heard, then the listener, the reflector, becomes the speaker, and they select someone else in the circle to reflect back what they're saying. And the listening and the reflecting go around like that till everyone's had a chance to speak and listen. And then it goes again, then it just starts again. And you keep doing rounds until the end of the time. And we're going to be doing that for about an hour and a half today. 2 hours is a great amount of time to do this, because the conversation really starts to go deep. And on the second or third time that you get to speak, people really start to get past their initial thoughts about what the topic is. And we do have a topic today. A circle could have a topic or not have a topic. We do have a topic today, which is the fourth principle. But it's also a rule of the circle that when it comes to you, when it's your turn to speak, you can speak about whatever you want, whatever is alive in you that feels important at the moment. And that it's important to do that, because that's what keeps the conversation real and alive and meaningful. I think that's it. That's not everything, but you'll learn more about, really learn this process by doing it. And the facilitator will guide you or answer any questions you have about the process. Marta, if I've left anything out, feel free to jump in and add.
That was it. Thank you so very much, Lou. I think that's very much it. So if anyone has any, Dean, I see you've got your hand up, Dean.
I think we're ready to go into the rooms.
Okay.
We have
and then in the breakout room. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the group's got a little bit bigger than, because people kept joining. So we have group 1, Martha, you're facilitating. 2, Lou. 3 is Carolina. 4 is Bill, and 5 is Anne Jordan. So those are the facilitators. So I think, are we ready? And we'll do introductions in the room. And yeah, so.
Okay. See you back here after. See you in a bit.
Thank you, Edwin.
Hello, here we are. Can you hear me well? And okay. So Lou already explained the method. and I believe all of you have experienced an empathy cycle. So what I do is I have a timer, and so when the 5 minutes come, I'll just show a little glare. Now, when you see that, it does not mean that you need to stop there and then. Please, if you're sharing at that moment, do continue that sentence, that idea, you know, bring it to a close, but share, continue sharing, so you feel a sense of completion. And also, if you're reflecting at that moment, do give yourself the time to carry on that reflection, so that your listener, so your speaker feels fully heard. So maybe I'll be the first.
Should we do a quick round of introductions?
Oh yeah, that'd be good. Right. Yeah, that's good.
I'm Edwin Rutch from the Empathy Circle Work Group. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area.
I'm Marta. I'm from Portugal, based in Cork in Ireland, part of XR and guardianship here. Yeah, Stu?
Yeah, I'm Stu. I'm based in Bristol. And at the moment, I'm not in any teams. I've stepped back for a period of my own reflection and also tending to some burnout. And so I'm just doing the occasional things like this. Yeah, April.
My name is Richard. I'm originally from the Netherlands, at the moment in Germany, close to Berlin, Leipzig. My background is nonviolent communication. And I also run an empathy group, daily empathy group in Germany.
Thank you. I'm April. I'm currently based in Scotland, and I am involved in Guardianship and Visioning Circle. Thank you.
Thank you, April. Yeah, so I think whoever wants to start, if I'm the first listener, then we can go from there.
I'll start. I'll model it. Speak to you, Marta. Yeah, I really like, I'm just so happy Stu is here. It's like Stu is sort of the gateway to me for XR. I mean, it was just kind of his generosity and invitation. So he got me connected with the XR Future Democracy Hub, and kind of everything kind of snowballed from there. So I have a warm feeling for Stu.
Yeah, so you're very excited that Stu's here, and there's this bubbliness from, you know, having been introduced to so much in XR through him, and now you get the chance to be here together.
Yeah, and I noticed him talking about reflection in that little mirror down there in the corner. So I thought I would outdo him, and I got my own mirror here. So this is my mirror to have that reflection. So yeah, so I got a big mirror.
So you like his idea with the mirror, you noticed that, and so you got your own big one there.
Yeah, and yeah, the topic is really good. Reflecting and learning, I think, is really important. You know, sort of a topic that you know, it's really important to me personally, because, you know, I like to learn, and I think it's also the part of learning is under the human-centered design community, that it kind of designs products, services, just kind of designs anything. They have a saying that's fail early, fail often, because then you'll succeed faster. So it's like, also in the learning, also realize you're going to fail, and not worry so much about the failure, but just kind of learn from the failure, so you don't become immobilized, or, you know, just by, oh, I'm worried I'm going to be failing. And even for the empathy circles, I try to, you know, impart that too, is, you know, you're going to mess up, things are going to blow up, but, you know, just move forward and learn from it, and, you know, learn by doing, and don't get too worried about the failures.
So you were saying that you really enjoy this principle, you like it, and you were saying about human-centered design, but the ideas I got from that was that for you, it's about learning and continuing to learn, and not taking yourself too seriously. and not become too caught up.
Yeah, in the human-centered design, they have an exercise, like if you go to the design school at Stanford, you do an exercise, and then when you fail, you celebrate, say, yay, we failed. So you get kind of, just have a instead of like, oh shit, I failed, it's like, yay, I failed, kind of sort of celebrate it. So I think that's a great principle to sort of shift the energy, you know, around the thought process around that.
Yeah, it's about failing, but failing better, and to carry on trying and to keep improving and not drop your creativity for fear of failing.
Yeah, and I'm also doing the technical support, you know, for keeping an eye on everything. So I might kind of go to my photo periodically to kind of deal with other issues. So I feel fully heard.
So you're letting us know that you might go places because you're doing the technical bit as well. Richard, may I speak to you?
Sure.
I'm really excited, and I'll try and calm myself down over the next little while. So yeah, that was quite some intense 10 minutes. I loved it. It was, you know, particle physics, and wow. It's easy for me to get excited, and then I also have very present that what we're trying to do is not easy. So I think for me, that's the first thing I wanted to name, is like, I love it. And in a way, you know, it comes natural to me, this like failing, but it's not like that for everyone. I'll stop there.
What I hear is that you are excited also by the introduction, and that there is a lot of things going on in you. You also say that you get easily excited, and at the same time you also are aware that the things that we are doing here require some depth, some deepness. And I heard that you see almost the electrons flying around now.
Yeah, there's something about it not being easy. So like, you know, what we're trying to do, and I'm saying, you know, as individuals, there's XR as well, but like we as individuals is continuously questioning. You know, we get somewhere and like, I got better at this and I figured something out, and then the next day I go, does that still serve me? Does that still serve us? Is that still where I want to go? And so yeah, it's not easy, right? We try and create and build community and make it easier that way, and see it as our mission, and that makes it easier again. But it's not. Continuously questioning ourselves is a useful thing, but it's not an easy thing.
What I hear is you you see the value of questioning, this dynamic questioning, but you also see that that's one of the things to build communities. So it's an important thing, and at the same time you also see that it's not easy.
Yeah. It takes a certain degree of courage. You know, it takes a certain degree of walking into discomfort, and it's not equally easy for everyone. So, you know, I feel personally I've got levels of privilege and certain levels of self-confidence maybe that allow me to keep questioning myself without crashing, if you will. You know, yeah. And I, you know, I think I feel like I need to acknowledge that not everyone can afford that sometimes.
So what I hear is that you are aware that although you have some fluency in this questioning, that you are aware that it's not as easy for everybody. That's what I hear.
Yeah. and that it takes the humility that Stuart was talking about as well. That learning that we are but a tiny, tiny piece of the puzzle, and we won't always be needed, and that's okay.
What I hear is also that humility is an important aspect for you, and also this realization that there is that we are a small piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Rich. I feel very heard.
Yeah. Stuart, would you like to reflect me?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this thing with reflecting. For me, it's also, I notice this kind of things, especially with Zoom, what we are doing now. I notice kind of it helps me not to reflect, not just reflect myself and in that sense see myself, but it helps me to see bigger things, to see the reflection of something bigger where I'm a part of.
So you like this idea of reflecting, and in doing Empathy Cafe, being on Zoom, it sort of helps you to see the bigger picture and to reflect on the bigger picture of things.
Yeah, and also in a way, kind of, it's not like seeing me, but it's like seeing we or so. You know, it's kind of, it's in a way it's seeing myself, but seeing myself as something bigger, and that's kind of, I find it fascinating. That it's really a mirror of some bigger organism or structure or community. That it's, yeah, it's a reflection, kind of seeing a reflection of something that's bigger than me.
So it's by doing this, you get to see. Well, you just summed it up in that last sentence, but a reflection of something that's bigger than you. That what's being reflected back to you is not exactly you. It's somehow it's bigger, and there's something there.
I also like kind of, it's not just bigger in the sense like size-wise, but it's also like different aspects or so. It's like hearing different things. And lately I also had something about conspiracy theories, and it was interesting to hear different people on different sides of the conspiracy spectrum, so to say. And like, oh yeah, this is your view, this is your view. And in a way, it helps me to see humanity or so, something like that.
So the reflection helps you to see like the multifaceted nature of yourself and reality. And then in recent conversations or engagement with conspiracy theories you've had, you've sort of been able to see those different perspectives in a different way. Is that right?
Yeah. And also sometimes I have the impression that for me it's also almost like, in a way, like seeing, or also in a way talking with the soul of humanity or so, kind of in a sense that humanity is made of a lot of different people who all have different emotions, and you know, by somehow, by this form of reflection, that it helps to see like, okay, how is the human soul, is kind of, if the human soul is kind of, or the emotional body of humanity, that I see the reflection of the humanity soul, something like that.
So in the human, or in the reflection, you also see something of the human soul that's allowed to sort of come out. Is that right? I feel like I missed something in what you're saying.
It's not so much the human soul, but the soul of humanity, so to say, kind of Gaia is a little bit too big word for me, but kind of, it's like a very tangible way of connecting, mirroring, reflecting, seeing reflections of the soul of humanity, and seeing things that are bigger than the five of us, so to say.
Yeah, okay, so seeing sort of almost the collective soul coming out, the patterning of humanity is allowed to come out through reflecting on ourselves and each other.
And also kind of on what really intrigues me is kind of seeing almost on an emotional level, seeing the whole of humanity as a kind of humanity as a child or as a teenager who has experienced all kinds of things. And by hearing all those small voices, I see some reflections of this humanity soul who is, struggling with the past and in this sense, struggling with the virus, kind of, and seeing how the whole kind of responds to those events. And I find that fascinating, this reflection.
Yeah, so you find, I like how you say that, but you find the reflection, this fascinating sort of way to get at humanity as a system, humanity as a whole, and all of the different voices and all of the different parts that have coming out and getting represented in some way.
Mm-hmm. And it's almost, so I think that's my last sentence, it's almost like you look in the mirror and it's not just that you see yourself, but you see yourself as a whole part of something bigger. And that's for me kind of this value of reflection, not just seeing yourself, but there is something way bigger. And it is also like a mirror. If I cannot see myself, so I have to use a mirror to see myself. And somehow I feel with this kind of collective reflection, it's also like a way to see us, so to say. Yeah.
So the mirror allows you to see yourself, but also allows you to see like all of the different roles that you inhabit and move into and move out of, and that others also do the same as. Is that?
Yeah. Thank you for reflecting. Yeah. Thank you. I feel heard. Yeah.
Thanks, Rich. April, would you listen for me?
Would be a pleasure. So
somebody just before we broke up into breakout groups sent this in the chat to me privately. It says, "Hi Stuart, although I found your talk interesting, this is not what we should be doing in relation to today's agenda. Many people may not understand the language you use, although I found it riveting." And that, I sort of received that with a little bit of glee, because there's you found it riveting. Oh, that's exciting. I'm excited that you found it riveting and that something was really useful to you. And then there's a little bit of frustration of, so why are you worrying about the imagined person that you think didn't understand it? Or are you saying that part of you didn't understand some of what I said, and you're feeling sort of down because of that?
Yeah. So you, first of all, you shared a bit of something that somebody had sent to you, and your reactions to that, which were both delight at the language that says they found your talk riveting, and also some frustration at the need to reach for with some kind of criticism, really, that it says we should not be doing something, and that's left you a little frustrated in not really understanding whether they were saying they didn't understand or just trying to give a bigger voice.
Yeah, and I'm also okay with not everything I say is going to be heard and understood by everybody. And maybe there's a time and a place to share certain things, and I thought I'd take this time to share something that deeply excited me, even if it is a little bit complex. And I hoped that I framed it in a way that said, it's okay if you don't understand this.
That you feel okay in yourself, that you don't have to, that you recognize some people might not get it, and that's okay. And you're still quite clear in yourself that this is an opportunity for you to express yourself in the way you do, and that some people might not get it, and you are delighted. Obviously, some people do. They find it riveting.
I don't think when I did my talk that I mentioned the how much sort of the experimental nature of Extinction Rebellion attracted me to it when it was rising up, and sort of that experimental nature that Marta was talking about, of we try things and we fail and we do things a bit differently, and we sort of there's something there, and maybe I mentioned it, but I'm not remembering whether I did. But I'm wishing that I had emphasized that a little bit more. Hey, it's experimental. We've got to try and we've got to fail. And the importance to me of failure as well is something that I wish I'd have highlighted.
You're making clear now that something that you might have missed in expressing that one of the things that excites you so much about the movement is this idea that we are experimenting, that Extinction Rebellion is willing to show up, to try something, learn from it, and try something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I found it funny that to myself, I didn't have, like I recorded the talk to myself beforehand, but I didn't listen to it myself again, so I didn't get that immediate reflection back. And I was also hoping to do it to somebody and get the reflection from them, but then it just didn't work out beforehand, and so I didn't give myself the reflection and the chance to learn a little bit more about how what I said might go down or might be heard. And so there's a lack of reflection in my own practice today that I'm conscious of.
I hear an acknowledgement that you were stepping into almost modeling, reflecting and learning, and that you missed the bit where you actually listened back. Though you recorded it and experimented with saying it, you didn't actually listen back and get your own reflections or from somebody else in order to move you forward and maybe present it differently. And maybe that was something you missed and you learned you might do next time.
Thanks. It feels great.
Thank you. Okay, Marta, would you like to listen to me?
Would love to.
Yeah, I was bowled over by Stu's introduction, and really excited by it. The way I was first excited also when I kind of grasped that Extinction Rebellion was an experimental movement, that it was willing to risk experimenting in dangerous, exciting ways, and that absolutely was something that fueled my desire to get involved.
Yeah, so you got very excited hearing Stu today, and it's like that excitement that you got when you understood that that's what XR was about to begin with, that concept of like, this is experimental and it's uncharted territory.
Yeah, I mean, uncharted in that what it was doing already was rolling out a type of a learning from the movements who'd gone before. So it was already saying we're rooting ourselves in what we can learn from movements who have already gone before us, and we stand on the shoulders of that. And that acknowledgement was very important to me, that it didn't just kind of, you know, appear out of nowhere or put itself on some pedestal. It immediately grounded itself in what came before.
Yeah, so for you it was really important that immediately it acknowledged that it was growing out of other movements that had been there before and were there, so it didn't just come out of a vacuum. And so it was taking that, rooting in it and growing from there.
Yeah. And I guess another aspect that the possibility of being a group rooted in exploring and experimenting with things was that the movement would be willing to experiment also with uncharted territory, with things that are commonly seen as not part of this kind of movement or not part of human discussion, that it would be that the movement itself would be willing to go beyond commonly explored borders. So for me, that was in exploring the other than human connection and influences that could move us forward.
So it was very much about also expanding, of also doing things that hadn't been done before and not being afraid of experimenting beyond just the normality of it, and actually also bringing in the other than human experience into it too.
Hearing that back, I realized that that's not what I meant. I didn't mean to say that it hadn't been done before. Of course it has. What it hasn't been done is linked together with a mass movement that embraces all those aspects that aren't out. Some aspects of it are kind of edge walkers or outside.
So you don't mean that it's not happened before, but that it was integrating. It was integrating what had been done before now, and sort of bringing it in and making it more mainstream or more central, bringing different aspects in. I don't know if it...
maybe, I guess, because as I hear it back, I really hear, this is not that this has never been done before, or this voice doesn't get heard, but it isn't part of the kind of dare I say, but the kind of white middle class mass values within the reach that was kind of originally rolled out. And it's not that it was built in at the beginning. Partly why I was attracted to be there was to give that voice, was to make sure that that voice had a place in this conversation, to bring that voice powerfully into the conversation.
So those voices were there, but now they were getting into a mainstream white middle class audience at large scale and just spreading out. And so they were given, don't know if that...
It was just to bring it for that assimilation, to bring it as part of the experiment. That was all. Thank you.
To bring the other than human voices as part of the experiment. Edwin, are you going to be here for?
Yep, listening. Cool.
Something happened for me there. I don't know what it was. Sometimes it's hard, I find, there's a certain responsibility with articulating certain things that I've not figured out yet. And I think it's part of the work that we do, is to try and articulate ourselves in ways that are clear and transparent and don't create harm, I think. I'll stop there.
So you're addressing something that happened, and I'm not quite sure when. So something that happened, and you're just saying there's something where we need to be able to clearly, simply sort of express ourselves.
Yeah, I didn't explain myself. So when I was trying to reflect what April was saying, one, I was struggling with it myself, but then I was also becoming very aware of how important it is to articulate, to honor the work that has been done and the sources of it, and to articulate things in a way that is honest, authentic, but does not cause any harm, or trying not to cause any harm.
So as you were trying to reflect what April was saying, you were sort of noticing, you know, taking things from other groups, other movements, and then you're just seeing the importance of sort of articulating clearly, simply what sort of your ideas, and then, but in a sense where, but being mindful that it doesn't like do harm to people.
Yeah. And so as I say that, I'm like, oh, am I going to be articulate enough that I'm not going to make a mess of this? And at the same time, I'm like, but bloody hell, we're talking about reflecting and learning. You know, if I can't mess it up, then what am I trying to do? And so this is like a circle that we get ourselves into.
So you've got kind of this mental circle going that you're kind of worried about expressing yourself clearly, but then you're kind of looking at that, you know, concern, saying, well, if I can't, you know, feel free to do that, you know, what are we doing? What am I doing? And so you're kind of getting into this loop here.
Yeah. And so, like, I loved what Stu was saying earlier about, you know, the 3 demands. They were brilliant. They served a purpose, and then they might not at some point, you know, and that's like, something serves a purpose, and then it's up to the collective to understand when it stopped serving that purpose.
So kind of something else that's coming to your mind is just what Stu is saying about the demands can sort of change if they don't serve the purpose. And so it kind of maybe be open to change. Just kind of thinking about that. Yeah.
And whose purpose and when and how, you know, and it's an ever evolving sort of movement.
So is it sort of like how and when and why do you make those changes? And so you're just kind of exploring that or thinking about that?
I'm going a bit all over the place. And then the other thing that I was thinking was how even myself in my little humble bubble, when, you know, if it was a year back, I'd probably be talking about developed countries, or I'd be talking about things with a certain language. And then I start using expressions like the majority world. And, you know, it just keeps evolving. And I keep knowing that the ways in which I'm expressing myself now are still not the best version that they can be, and are probably still not making justice and putting things in the right place. But that's okay, because that's the best I can do right now. And it's, you know, it's an iterative process, and for me and for each of us and for the movement.
So it sounds like you're trying not to judge yourself, like for the language you use, and you're trying to grow and get, you know, better at your articulating of kind of ideas and concepts, and you're trying to get to something, it's something that you're trying to get to maybe be more truthful or something. I don't know. It's something like that.
Thank you, Edwin.
Okay, then Richard, can I speak to you?
Yes.
I'm just going to pop out to go and get myself some food because it's dinner time and I've got something directly after this, so I'll be back within 5 minutes.
Let's see. Yeah, so I was kind of coming to the reflecting part again, because, you know, you had mentioned it and Stu had mentioned it. So I'm just sort of thinking about the nature of reflection. You know, it's part of the principle is reflecting. So I'm just sort of sitting with the reflecting part notion.
So what I hear is that you heard this reflection several times in our stories, and that you're also kind of sitting on it, probably puzzling what your view is.
Yeah, and what's sort of coming up is is sort of the empathic reflection. Like here we're this reflecting, you know, I'm speaking and you're reflecting what I'm saying, just trying to be a mirror to it. So that's like a core, you know, of the sort of the empathy process, you know, or one of them is that notion of, you know, being present and sort of reflecting what the other person is, you know, feeling, thinking, what's going on for them. So there is that. So you're holding up a mirror for me, of, yeah. So that's a reflecting thing.
So what I hear is that you see this strong correlation with empathy, which is also kind of mirroring, reflecting back. And that you also see that what we are doing is kind of empathically reflecting back.
Yeah, and that's part of the empathy, you know, with mirror neurons, that when we do an action and see an action, we feel the same thing. So if I slap myself, I feel a slap, right? I feel that if you were to do that, the same sort of neurons that fired when I slapped myself would fire in you. And I don't know if you felt it, you know, I did it kind of mildly, but that is sort of how we're, you know, biologically wired, supposedly, in terms of with neurons, of how we're able to sort of sense each other, that, you know, we sort of feel into the other person. We can sense what they're feeling because these mirror neurons sort of fire in us, and we sort of simulate what the other person is experiencing. So that's kind of another sort of aspect of the mirroring.
What I hear is that you also see this ability to reflect, that it is a core human ability, also kind of that it even is in our nervous system. That's really kind of the core of being human, is this ability to reflect, and not just reflect, but also feel like another, and also in that sense connect. That is a deeply built-in human mechanism.
And I find that a really powerful and sort of orienting sort of way of being. So I find I get a reflection from everyone in this circle, and it sort of helps orientate me, you know, of who I am, you know, how I sort of navigate in the world. And I find it very grounding. So like if one person were to just kind of criticize me, say, you're terrible, you're a horrible person, you know, you can kind of take all that on. But you get multiple people kind of mirroring you, you kind of get a bigger picture of yourself, you know, a more complete sense of who you are. So, and so in like with conflict resolution, all that kind of stuff, it gets pretty intense, pretty crazy. But if you have that mirroring, you know, I feel very oriented. I can keep grounded and, you know, navigate, and I have sort of a trust in that space, you know.
Yeah, what I hear, and also kind of I can see on your face, there is this joy when you talk about this grounding, and also this navigating, and that it helps you also to see kind of the bigger perspective, the bigger picture, and that it helps you to ground and to see yourself from different perspectives.
And there's a friend of mine that I said, oh, let's do this empathic listening. And he said he didn't want to because he had somehow gotten into a hall of mirrors where everything was reflecting everything else. And somehow he got lost in that. For me, I don't have that experience. I don't even know what he really means by it, but he wouldn't do empathic listening because somehow he lost himself in this hall of mirrors. Whereas I actually sort of find myself,
So what I hear is a friend of you who went to this hall of mirrors, and kind of he completely lost himself. And that's also his argument now, that he doesn't want to get into this mirroring because for him it was a kind of a less comfortable experience.
Yeah, and I thought my time is up. I'll just say that he ended up being committed. So I just had that last part. So, and then I feel heard.
Yeah, what I hear is that he was now committed, kind of.
Yeah.
That you also aware that the time is.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, April, would you like to reflect me?
Thank you. I'd love to, Richard.
Yeah, I feel intrigued by this word reflection. It reminds me of this. There is this poem from Thich Nhat Hanh, which is it's called "Call Me by My True Names." Kind of, if you like it, I can. And it's basically I will read a few lines to get a sense of it. Kind of here, it's I am a mayflower metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am a frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. So kind of this ability to identify yourselves with different things. It reminds me of kind of this, I see a link with reflecting.
Yeah. Oh, I suddenly got lost in my own thoughts, which is just what, that kind of poetry does for me. So yes, thank you. You shared an amazing piece of wordsmithing that highlights the connection that we have when we see ourselves reflected in other beings.
Yeah. And also, and if I just copy the link here for later, so you have the link with it. For me, it's also, I know it's also when I tell it, for me, it also has to do with identity or so. I noticed that this reflection, it also helps me to, in a way, to get a little bit looser of my identity of Richard. And by empathically kind of connecting with Marta, I'm also getting a little bit Marta, and with a little bit April, and a little bit Edwin. And by that I get a little bit like something bigger or so. And I find it interesting to, also with the word reflecting, that it is really like seeing or so. That for me, reflecting and seeing has some deep connection with each other. Like seeing, yeah. So the link with seeing.
Mm. I heard that there was a kind of expansiveness in the actual process of reflecting that helps you get kind of let go of your individual identity and feel a taste, see a taste of the people that you are reflecting with.
Mm-hmm. I also feel that there is this link with learning, that I truly feel that as a species, kind of, that we are not learning like individuals and we add that up or so, but there is some fundamentally different way of learning going on at the moment. That it's like the learning of basic, maybe it's learning to see who we are, or learning to see us differently, or getting rid of an old story what we are. Like, we are all human beings who are just self-optimizing and working together to self-optimize more, but there is this shift of human view, or is it kind of the view what it is to me, the view what it is to be human, that's kind of shifting. And I see that in this reflecting and learning who we truly are, or learning what we also are, or somehow in that identity sense.
The connection, it seems that in the reflecting and this kind of getting a taste of other people's thought processes is when you bring that to the learning process, you're appreciating that there's maybe some kind of deeper learning going on here that might be rooted in letting go of some old stories that we've been rooted in.
Yeah.
And that there's again this expansiveness for something about who we are as humans coming in.
Yeah. And I also feel thrilled that that there is one part of me that feels like, yeah, that's really necessary because the old story doesn't fit anymore. Also seeing what happens now with the whole corona, the COVID stuff, that there is also kind of, it's still on some old reflections who we are as human beings, and that we don't want to die, and that we have to be safe by not doing anything. We are the safest if we don't do anything. And I feel like, yeah, there is something to learn there. There's something to learn, like, hey, what does death mean? what does it mean to be connected? So kind of, and I find that an intriguing part.
Thank you. I really hear your curiosity fueled, both in this line of inquiry about learning and reflection, and also running parallel with our immediate circumstances of the virus, kind of enforcing this inactivity to keep safe, and the sort and how that is maybe landing on people's having time to really sit, reflect, and learn something more.
Yeah, thank you. I feel heard. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Stu, are you able to listen?
Yes, thank you. All the better with food inside me.
Thank you. These are, this is so rich, and I'm so enjoying this conversation, and there's some things I really didn't want to miss. I mentioned earlier, but this learning process, it's not, in my head, it kind of says that new learning comes along, and it just, that the old learning would just let go, move aside, hey, there's new learning here. And that's not how it has evolved in my life. The old learning hangs on, kicking and screaming, telling me, but this is the way life should be. And the new learning's kind of, at the edges going, but there's something more here. Yeah.
I hear you talking about how the things that you think have a sort of momentum to them, and they hang on. And when there's new learning that's trying to come in, that momentum sort of marginalizes and pushes it aside, and makes it quite hard for it to come in and really come into the center.
Yeah, thank you. It takes a conscious effort, and often coming back to it over and over again. Practice. There's something about this culture as well. We're rooted in a culture that has a competence addiction that says somehow, we can't show up as if we make mistakes. We have to show up as if we can do things. And while Extinction Rebellion brought this as a principle, this is one of the principles that has been marginalized, that has been kind of not given the full attention that it could have benefited from at the beginning.
I think, or what I heard you say is that society has this expectation that that you'll be able to do things, that there's a competence expected of people and of movement, and then we've somehow internalized that, and then that's led to, or maybe it's not led to, but it goes in hand with this principle and value being marginalized, that, hey, yeah, of course we can do rebellion because we know how, and sort of forgetting we need to do the reflecting and learning.
Yeah, I mean, rushing out into the exploratory side of it, fine about that, but the actual bit where we stop and pause afterwards and do take the time necessary for the practice of reflection and learning, that I feel is something we could give more time to now.
So you see a willingness for people to go out and explore and do the experiment, but then to not necessarily look at the results and look at the data and look at the sort of, what does this mean side of things, and we haven't developed that practice strongly as you'd like.
Though I inside quails at the word data. And I get that's how some people quantify things, but yeah, reflection and empathy, the way that Edwin was talking about it earlier, both rely on connection. And what we have been, magnificent at is forging deep connection with each other, rooted in sharing risk. That's been the prosperity, the sudden sense of deep connection with people for whom something really matters, so much so they're willing to risk liberty and physical harm.
So I heard something about the connection that people have got through this that allows them sort of the space to take risks. But I think I missed exactly your point.
I suppose it's that both reflection and empathy rely on this form of connection, and what we are living in is a culture, a talks, you know, of layers and layers of inbred, you know, heritage, education, parenting that deliberately disconnects us, not just from people, but absolutely disconnects us from the other than human world. And that for me is where the power of empathy, reflection, and learning loses its impetus. It gets stuck in a kind of mirrored box of just going round on itself, not being influenced by connection to other things.
I like what you said there about how both reflection and empathy require connection. And then to bring in what you said at the start about this sort of momentum of previous learning, that reflection is not worth doing. And how that sort of, pushes aside the reflection and how hard it is for us to actually spend the time and value the reflecting and learning.
Thank you, Stu. I feel heard.
Thanks, April. Edwin, would you be willing to listen to me?
Yes, listening.
I just want to bring in data was a word that April responded to, and to just encourage April to look up the etymology of that, because it's also got roots in the Proto-Indo-European and giving.
So you're just bringing up the term data and feeling see a smile, some happiness, excitement about the word data, especially for April to look it up, like the deeper meaning, the etymology of it.
Yes, thank you. And I don't actually know whether it's an exciting word, but a lot of the Proto-Indo-European words have really beautiful sort of roots in them. I don't know enough. I just like skimmed it over in a second there.
So you actually did a bit of a check here to what is the etymology of it. You're not sure if it's beautiful, but they sometimes sounds like sometimes they are.
Yeah. So the books that I referenced is that are in the chat after my intro talk, both by Arnold Mindell, who's the founder of Process Work, which is the psychotherapy and group facilitation training that I'm doing. And it's really become obvious sort of to me in this training how much of psychotherapy is about getting present with what's going on and finding ways to reflect that back to the clients in a way that will help them to relate to things differently and integrate this new way of seeing things.
So you've really been seeing the importance in psychotherapy of that reflection, of just reflecting sort of what is, and with that reflection, it helps the person sort of move forward. And with their own growth or change.
Yeah. Related to that is that I find the Empathy Cafe practice quite scary, because it means you've got to really sit there and be present to be able to reflect back. And I don't always think, oh, I'm going to forget what they've said.
So you're feeling some anxiety or even fear because you have to be really present and you have to be able to reflect, and you're like, fear has some anxiety about remembering and being able to do it maybe adequately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was a side note just to say that so I can feel a bit more at ease with myself in the next sort of half hour. So that thing about the psychotherapy and reflecting back is also, that's why it comes in, and what excites me so much about process work is it's about group facilitation and reflecting back to a group what's going on for the group in a way that will sort of bring out the conversation that can be had by that group. And then at the broader scale, societal scale, I see the movement, like movements are basically doing the same thing. It's trying to bring something out that reflects back to the society as a whole. Hey, this is the society. This is us. We're all a part of it. And we've got to say this in a way that is strong enough that the society as a whole will pay attention enough for it to be heard, and then to integrate, oh yeah, that is us. Therefore, we need to change.
Wow. Yeah, so you're just exploring the nature of reflection. Like you can reflect an individual and it helps them sort of change and see themselves. You as a facilitator of a group, you can facilitate the sort of the energy or of the whole group, and it creates sort of a change. And also there's the reflection of a whole society or a whole culture, and that helps it see and integrate and make some kind of a change. So it's like totally scalable.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what keeps me so excited about like pouring my life into activism and protest movements and civil disobedience, is because this seems to be the best way that I've come across to create that societal shift in a rapid way, where it results in behavioral change across societies.
Yeah, so it's like this method or this approach or kind of this insight is what keeps you going with sort of this movement, because you see that it's kind of like the most effective way, and that's kind of what's been keeping you sort of motivated and moving forward with that core insight about the reflection.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Such a good principle and value. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, you're really like excited about it, thrilled with that principle.
I want to say,
it has a lot of meaning to you. This is really meaningful.
This feels really good to be here. I felt quite burnt out recently, and there's not that many things that have got me so excited and sparked up with life. And it feels really good to be here. I'm really grateful for this.
Yeah, so you're feeling some energy, some spark. You've been feeling a bit burned out, and so you're really glad to be here, and you're feeling sparked and energized with getting this in the Empathy Cafe circle.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Yeah, April, okay, speak to you.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, wow, I didn't know where this would go. And we're getting into this reflection, these very interesting, I mean, I feel like I'm really learning a lot about just kind of the nature of reflection and the power of it. Yeah, wow, I feel kind of moved by it.
Yep, I hear that you're learning a lot about from other people's sharings about reflection and building, I guess, on your own understanding of it.
And I'm sort of appreciating the learnings. It's like, oh wow, I'm learning this is this. Look at it, and I kind of feel it kind of deeply. Like I'm going to remember these insights that I'm getting from everyone. I can just kind of sense it in my body. Oh, this is a learning that's going to stick.
That you have a willingness to be changed by what you hear.
Yeah, and sort of an appreciation of it too.
And an appreciation.
And the other thing that was on my mind was there's sort of like processes or principles. And I think, and I'd mentioned the human-centered design process, and I don't see it mentioned. I hear it sort of echoes of it in XR a little bit, and I hear, you know, Roger Hallam talk about he's a movement designer, right? So he does talk about that design. There's a whole design community, human-centered design that, you know, designs anything, any product, service, movement. You can just design anything. So I did want to talk a little bit about that, the process that the design movement uses.
So you're bringing in the human-centered design process that you've heard hints of through Roger calling himself a movement designer, and you're bringing in some more principles of that.
Yeah, and you know, it's centered here in the San Francisco Bay Area with companies like IDEO and Stanford at the design school. So the process, the idea is that if you design anything, you need to first empathize with people about their needs to really hear where they are. And it's kind of so very based on empathy to hear, and you kind of interview people, you hear where they are, and you empathize with their felt experiences and their needs. And so that's like the very first step in terms of designing anything with using their process.
So you named a few places that this had grown in and was centered in, and then told us the very first principle of this, rooted in empathizing with the problems or the needs that are in the people that are wanting something designed. Yeah,
so then you kind of feel into, you kind of interview, and you find sort of a problem area, and you just find the problem area of, you know, it can be the environment, like there's global warming, this is a problem. And then you say, this is a problem, this is a real, you know, fear. And then you turn it from the problem, you turn it into a statement like, how might we address climate change, right? So you just have you translate it from the problem into a how might we statement. And then and that's sort of like defining the problem. And once you sort of define the question, then you go into kind of a creativity mode, like just coming up with all kinds of different ideas. And you get a whole field of possibilities, of ideas, and then you hone in on one of them and you create a prototype. You don't have to remember all this to reflect, don't worry. But then you create a prototype and then you go out and test it. And then you empathize with the experience people have with the tested, and then you just keep iterating on the process. So it's a whole iterative process of empathizing, defining, kind of, they call it ideation, which is creativity, prototyping and testing, and then you start the whole process over again. So it's a kind of a whole mindset for sort of designing pretty much anything.
There was a lot of information.
Yeah, you don't have to, just the essence is fine.
Yeah, and I get that that the process involves that empathizing, identifying a problem, generating ideas with those people rooted in the problem, and then narrowing that down to one idea that you might prototype, try out, and then take back to the problem solvers to see, to reflect, I guess, and learn from.
To test it out, you know. It's so I feel, yeah, so I feel fuller. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, would you like to listen?
Sure.
I guess I would love to bring it back a little, just for me, to reflection and learning within Extinction Rebellion. And I'd love to talk about where I think excuse me, to something about those structures that we have been educated and parented and live within, a set of kind of societal cultural structures. And I'd like to talk about the invisible ones that we don't know are there because we were brought up as if this is the only way it is.
So what I hear is that you want to kind of, what I heard is kind of bring it down to, or bring it back to the XR context. And it's also within that context that you would also like to reflect on the hidden systems, the systems that were taught us through school, or to maybe not formally taught, but that we somehow got from our education, parents and stuff, and you would like to reflect on that.
I would say it was pretty formally, pretty decisively driven into us. And that it is designed to disconnect us from a lot of, from being able to empathize with a lot of the problems in the world. For me, and for Extinction Rebellion, the biggest one being the state of the climate and what we are participating in bringing down.
What I hear is that you also, in the movement that you make, that there was this thing, what we learned, that it was really drilled into. I also got a sense of force and violence, that it was thought in a kind of forceful and violent way. And also what I hear is that you lack this sense of empathy, and especially the empathy for the climate and the planet as a whole.
Okay, hearing that reflected back, I do definitely recognize it in myself. And I think that a lot of rebels go through a process that is painful, of waking up to some of these invisible lockdown thinking. And that as they start to wake up from that, there's a real struggle within themselves. There's shame and that for what we participate in, it's a really hard learning process.
So what I hear is also you use the word rebels, that there is this kind of, for getting into the awareness of a rebel, that you have to go through several stages, which are hard, and also kind of to unlearn. It's almost like unlearning things that you have been taught from the past, and that can be a difficult and also maybe painful process.
It's interesting that you used the word unlearning as if it was different from learning. Because we've been layered in with this, we didn't think it was learning. It's just, we were taught that's just the way it is. And so it seems like this new learning that tells us that it isn't that way at all is somehow doing something different than just learning. It's unlearning. There's a new paradigm for it. And I don't believe that's the case. I believe that's part of the lockdown in our thinking. We were absolutely given the structure that says this is the way it is. And it's very hard for that bit of learning to move aside. That is not, and just like the structures that hold us down, they are digging in their heels and telling us there's a million reasons why it's not possible for a new way of being, for the learning to actually land in everybody, and for them to step out with a new way of being.
So what I hear is that you see those structures, they're very powerful, and also that they don't always allow new learning to take root or to ground, because there is this thing that it didn't learn us to think, basically, kind of. It's more to follow than to think, kind of.
yeah, you can only think down this route. You can't think expansively, and that's what, you know, empathy and connection and this expansiveness of our thinking allows us to do, is to see a different way of being. And yet there are still things in us that say, I can't do without my car because I live in a remote place, or I can't do without, you know, visiting my family in another country. That, you know, that we are still tied to what we need to let go of in so many ways.
So what I hear is also the example of the car. There is this kind of this thing like letting go of things, and that it's not always hard, or that it's not always easy to let go of things, because there are some part of us that are still stuck or connected to those things that we actually want to get rid of.
Thank you, Richard. I feel heard.
Yeah. Marta, would you like to reflect me?
Listening.
It's also interesting. I was also kind of a little bit looking on the, after what Stuart said about the base of words. Also having here this base where learning comes from, and kind of here so says to follow or to find the track. And it's interesting that it here says like it's either following, which is like, okay, there is a structure and you just follow it, or you find it for yourself. And I find it interesting that it has something to do with a track or so, you know, kind of learning like, okay, where is my track? Where is our track? And there are all two, there's almost like two modes that are here just put in the same sentence. Like, how do you follow something? Okay, this is how it works, just follow the signs. And at the same time, there is like, okay, find your own track, while maybe all the signs are still pointing on the direction. And saying like, you know, the sign here, be happy, go to the shop, you know, kind of, and, you know, and just kind of ignoring all those signs and saying like, yeah, I have to find my own track and I find it interesting that there are two modes, like follow and find. Like,
so you're following Stuart a bit in looking at for the origin of words, and you were looking at the origins of learning, and there seems to be two options. It's either you follow a track or you find your own way, and so it's very just one or the other.
or at least in this description here.
In this description.
Here. Yeah. Yeah, and it's also another thing that kind of comes to my mind also that was earlier with empathy and reflection. I think also there is this quality in reflection that you can reflect some parts, or you can help people focus or so, kind of. And for me, kind of empathic reflecting is kind of a reflecting, but at the same time, it is a reflecting by focusing on some things, so to say. It's like focusing on feelings and needs and kind of on a deeper human level. And I also, that might also be interesting, that by reflecting, that reflecting is not always neutral. So by reflecting, you can also help people to, you know, to connect to a certain part of them. And I see that empathy is also this reflective quality where it's not just reflecting, but there is some human quality that helps to, you said something, but hey, I think this is where your heart is, or this is where your being is, or I find it an interesting thing that that reflecting is not just a mechanical thing, but it has some aspect of beauty or also some kind of quality, finding quality or so, that it is like, you know, there's something with, yeah, first reflect then, I think.
So you're saying that about the empathic reflection, there's some quality to it, a certain kind of a magic, because the person who's reflecting, they don't reflect the whole thing, they help shape, they pay attention, and so they help shape where you're going with the reflection.
Yeah, and it's almost like you know, if in a way, if you do storytelling, it's also like in a story you also focus at certain things, and you know, you're not going to tell everything. It's more like focusing on certain things, and I think that focusing and reflecting I think that's also that makes it powerful to learn, or so. Kind of for me, it's also so. Sometimes I have this thought that kind of awareness is like this torch. You know, we have this torch and we can just shine it. We can shine our light wherever we want. But in a way now, by you all listening to me, you all shine your torch at me, and I can see myself better. But in a way, kind of how you shine and where you shine, it helps me. If you all shine at my head, you know, I will reflect on my thoughts, you know, and think, oh, this is my thoughts. And if you all reflect on my heart, kind of, oh, I can see, I have a heart, you know, kind of. And that I find that an intriguing thing, that there is this, that reflecting is not neutral in a way, but it has some quality or so. It has some, yeah, quality. I don't know a better word for now.
So that that it's not neutral, the reflection, then the listener, by focusing their attention on something over something else, they're pointing you in a certain direction, and it might be your feelings or it might be your thoughts, but that they're guiding you, and that can be helpful to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I feel heard. Thank you for your shining light.
Yeah. We appreciate our shining lights. Stu, may I speak to you?
Sure.
There's something that April said in a circle the other day, or in the share at the end, about silence, about the importance of empty spaces, of and it keeps coming back to me lately. The empathy circles are great, but something I'm learning recently is that the slowing down of sharing empty spaces is also really important.
Let's do that now. And I take that moment to reflect back to you what you did at the start, which was to give us a moment of silence, to respond in a non-linguistic way. Hopefully reflects back a little bit what you're saying about the importance of silence.
Also what April was saying about the invisible layers of education, not necessarily formal education, but education. And it's like we grow up with some, I don't know the English word for it, but you know when you break your arm and people put plaster on your arm so that it's sort of immobile. When we grow up in our system, there's these structures, very clear structures around us that sort of make it that when we grow quite rigid and quite contained.
You're talking about the structures that sort of are educated into us. Maybe it's the cultural conditioning that sort of limits us within certain ways of being and thinking. They hold us into place. And it's that sometimes unspoken education or way of being that you're talking about.
Yeah. And so there's this facade of competence. And I know stuff, and I've got a diploma, and I'm not vulnerable. That is so the norm amongst our politicians and amongst You know, and I'm saying politicians, it could be people in power, let's just say. There's this, in a way, they're just embodying this ideal that we've been brought up with of being super competent and knowledgeable and failing. And unless, for me, unless we can feel the empathy together and the vulnerability together with them, with us, we're pretty fucked.
I'm hearing in your words a sort of a weight of what you're saying, how serious it is that our politicians, people in power, are caught into this competency ideology, that they have to know what's right, and unwilling to be in the complexity and the not knowing. And yet it's in those spaces and in empathy for those spaces that you find hope. And sort of without that, we're fucked.
Yeah, I feel that unless, like, we can strategize and do actions all we want, unless we reach the humanity there, I don't think, I don't see much hope, really.
You're saying that without reaching the humanity of people, regardless of our actions and our strategy, if we're not reaching humanity, then it's not going to achieve the change that you're hoping to see, we're hoping to see.
Thank you, Stu. You're very hard.
Did you give yourself 5 minutes? That seemed really short.
That was
Yeah.
5 minutes. Yeah, it's just we had silence in between.
Yeah, I took up some of your 5 minutes with silence too. Richard, would you be my listener? And I think maybe Marta, do you send a message to the group letting them know 5 minutes? We're coming up to that time now soon.
I can do that. I think we still have 12 minutes.
Is that right? Okay. All right. It says 1:23 on my screen. We've been here, but okay. Oh yeah, it also says it's 7:49, so ignore me. Yeah, I'm a little bit stuck on the dialogue around the term unlearning, and then the etymology to find or follow a track, a path. And there's something that says, like, dominant culture and cultural conditioning says, if you're not on this track, then you're not learning.
Mm-hmm. So what I hear is that you are, with this word, unlearning, and also with following and finding the track, and that also that you see that kind of the dominant structure says, like, okay, if you're not on this path, you are not learning. So it's you can only learn within the system.
Yeah, and then so I see that then as a form of gaslighting. If you're not on our path, then you're not learning, you're unlearning, which surely means you're becoming stupider. You know, it's like, it's a undermining of other realities, an incredible amount of violence tied up with that. Yeah, pause there.
Yeah. So what I hear for you is that you associate unlearning with getting stupid, kind of, that kind of, that almost kind of that learning is something that you learn, and unlearn is getting down, so to say, kind of. And that you see some violence in that. or some violence or some dominant energy in that.
Yeah, I'm reminded of like science classes throughout my child and teen years, where originally we were told there was this thing called water and it's a liquid, and then at some point we were told, oh, it's made up of molecules, and it's just H2O and that's all right. And then at some point we were told, oh, that these are, you know, particles, atoms. And so then it sort of outmoded the previous thinking. And then we were told, but the atoms are made up of electrons. And then we're told the electrons are made up of quarks, and none of it is really there. And it's eventually you get to wavicles and waveforms, and it's like there's constant learning, and it expands beyond the previous. But it's not that, and you can see from the larger view that the previous view is an approximation. But at no point did we unlearn, we just continued to learn. And I think that that's what happens in society, is we learn beyond the patterns of patriarchy and racism and the white supremacy and all of those things. And those structures will say, that's unlearning, but we need to, I think, hold on to it and say, no, this is learning, and this is expanding beyond what you can see, and seeing it as a particular perspective. And I've got a little bit fired up about that.
Mm-hmm. So I hear that you're fired up, and it also for you that is kind of this thing, like if you go to a higher level of complexity or a higher level of understanding, that you can see that the part that you learned before is kind of actually is an approximation. It's kind of, it's useful for its context, but on this higher level you can see more, and then you see like, hey, there's actually more to see there. And then by what you said, like from water, you know, it's water, like molecules and atoms, and the new levels don't unlearn or exterminate the previous levels, but they are more a deeper view or more complex view of what was there before.
Yeah. I also remember feeling a bit brave sometimes when I made these further expanded learnings. And now I'm pissed off at myself that I didn't talk about, I see my time's up, and I wanted to talk more about what are the learnings that XR could do, and I've missed my time.
Yeah, so what I hear is that you're a little bit pissed that you use your time to talk about this, and that you wanted to talk about learning within XR. So there is some.
I'm not pissed that I talked about that. I still wanted to talk about that, but I wanted more time. But thank you.
Edwin, would you like to reflect me?
Listening.
So I will just kind of, for me, it was like, okay, it was about reflection and learning. It's interesting because for me, kind of learning has also this kind of thing in getting better in it. At least kind of this thing like, okay, I'm learning more. So it's interesting for me. Unlearning has this quality of reducing complexity in a way. So I find it interesting that it had another connotation, that it also can have another connotation. For me, unlearning is also has this thing like back to the original simplicity or so, something like that.
So you're looking at just reflecting on the learning, and how learning is kind of usually getting better, but then you can also unlearn and get back to some kind of a simplicity. So just sort of noting that maybe, yeah.
And it's also one thing that I see at the moment, kind of, I think, also through social media, that in a way, although we didn't originally saw that with the internet, but that social media kind of brought us all back to emotions, kind of, you know, if somebody on the other world says something or does something, within in almost like seconds or at least minutes, we all can vibrate in that same energy. and that on this emotional level that we might not as fluent, we might not as humanity not be as fluent as we are now kind of through this World Wide Web that kind of plunges us right into all kinds of emotions that we are as a species, we are not really learned, and also the tools that we have, they are not used to deal with those emotions.
So I think you're saying that the technology, the social media has actually brought up a lot of emotions, but that there's not the tools for sort of how to sort of navigate those emotions and feelings, aren't there?
Yeah, I think it's partly like a skill or something. So like as a humanity, we we are still struggling with fake news, and kind of we try to deal on emotions as if it are facts or so, this is fake news, but at some point it's an emotion. Somebody's really pissed or somebody's really disappointed, it's not just one person, it's a whole country, or it's a whole subset of a country, and somehow as humanity we cannot deal with that, so to say, and and we try to put it back into facts, so to say, and that it's true or not true. And also seeing that people are completely refusing that facts even matter anymore, kind of, okay, it's not true, but I'm still angry, kind of forget the facts, I'm still angry, kind of. And in some sense, what I know from psychology, it has a kind of powerful thing, you're just angry, express your anger, you don't have to justify your anger, you're just angry, and now whole countries or part of countries, they are just angry, and we are trying to say like, yeah, but it's not, if you look at the facts, it's not true. And people say like, I don't care, I'm just angry. We are angry, kind of without maybe really knowing why, but we are still angry, kind of. And that somehow that the internet is still kind of fact-based thing that says like, okay, let's fact check, this is not true. And people say, I don't care, I'm just angry, kind of, and we're still trying to, also in the old system, that everything should be rational and everything should be logical, and
So you're just sort of noticing in that there's these emotions, feelings that come up like anger, and then others are saying, well, that's, those aren't the facts, and they're trying to regiment and create sort of reason and structure. And it's, you're sort of like, just let the feelings out, let the emotions out, and let's learn to navigate those emotions and feelings, and even discounting. They're using the facts. They're trying to have facts as a way of controlling that, and people just say, forget the facts. Just getting into their feelings. So.
Yeah, no, the thing is kind of, in a way, if somebody is angry, and I would support that person, I will also not say, okay, just be angry and just hit everybody on the face. But there is some way that you deal with anger in a kind of controlled setting. You say, like, okay, you're angry. You don't have to explain. You're just angry. Just explore it, find it. Kind of get into it. And somehow deal with the emotion, or learn from the emotion, or grow from the emotion, or and that's something when it comes to reflecting. And I think also kind of, for me, that's what empathy circles also do is that it's in a way, in some point, it also allows in a way people to speak up their emotions. And also what you did kind of with this, in the US, with this right and left wing politicians and people kind of, to just express their emotions and somehow make a container where people kind of are with each other and kind of can hear each other. And
we have 20 seconds. Just want to let you know
okay.
that we're going to go back to, but you're valuing the empathy circle as a container for constructively working with those emotions. And so maybe some appreciation for this as a container and a way to navigate those different, allow and navigate and work through those feelings.
And in a way, hold space in a way that Facebook and Google are not able to do.
Although I don't actually have to leave, because I was going to leave to hang out with my family, which is something that's started since COVID-19 and lockdown. but my mum is here, and she requested that they move the family gathering half an hour later. So I am around. But yeah, something that came out in the chats we just had is sort of the experimental nature of Extinction Rebellion and the importance of failure, and to see failure not as a thing to shy away from, and sort of how mainstream society thinks that we have to get things right, and it's got this sort of competence ideology that really holds us in place and tries to prevent us from doing things outside of what it wants us to be doing, and sort of how that cultural conditioning is ingrained in each of us. Yeah, I think that's where I want to sort of start and leave. Thanks.
Thank you, Stu. Richard.
Yeah, what I take with me is that reflection is also about seeing and seeing myself as part of a bigger thing, seeing ourselves. And that reflection for me also has to do with identify, what do I identify as, and also reflection can help me to identify or empathize also with other things, and there's a sense of expansion that I can, by reflecting, I can expand myself and include more, so to say.
Thank you, Richard. Nelly, can you go next?
We were talking about the importance of focusing on some very few goals, like the climate change, to be attractive for a large couple of people, and we can do that by internally of XR. We can try to integrate as many differences as possible and find as many similarities between us as possible, between different countries and different sexes, different work professions, and all that. So we work actively on integrating all our differences internally, but to the outside, we just, that was one idea what came up for me. Another idea was to have digital action, to do guerrilla theater, go out to meetings of other people and try to show them how they can be more self-organized, stand up for their needs, see each of them as leaders. Yeah. And yeah, and yeah, the time now is also a time where all the knowledge of the families, the mothers, grandmothers, grandfathers, is passed on to the younger generation, and that's also something which impressed me.
Thank you, Nelly. Caroline?
Yeah, it's an opportunity for me to reflect on my learning and where I learn, and how we can embody the regenerative culture that we're talking about, but how can we actually put it into practice and integrate it in throughout the movement and into our lives. And I'd like to say that Carolina exemplified and embodied how to facilitate a group, and I found it very inspiring.
Thank you, Caroline. Jeffrey Age.
Oh, I'm not sure what to say. No, I did enjoy the Carolina. Is that her name? She did a nice job. I enjoyed the way she facilitated the group.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Anne?
Oh, I think one of the things I really enjoyed hearing was about some of the things going on in Ireland, and that was really exciting. And yeah, there was a lot of energy and enthusiasm. So it's great hearing different perspectives from Australia and Germany, as well as Ireland. So thank you, everybody.
You've got my curiosity. What's going on in Ireland?
I'll just carry on, and then maybe then we've got time. Miguel? You're muted.
Yeah, for me, some things came up during the beginning of the talk, right to the end, really. We had really some great conversations with the group. But for me, what was important is within XR, we always use appropriate language, which is appropriate to every person, and not specific language which only maybe a select few can understand. And the idea of taking away XR demands, our demands, governments and media to tell the truth, governments and media act now to change, do something to the climate. Government and media also create people's citizens' assemblies. These are foundation stones of XR, and we should be very wary of getting rid of them. But at the same time, we have to be adaptable and flexible, but not to the extent to which we get rid of our designs. And the last point, yes, regenerative culture, but saving the climate first, XR and climate, then regenerative culture. So our focus should be not on division, animal rebellion, getting into social movements. We should be focused on the climate and then regenerative culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. John Bito.
Hello, I guess you unmuted me. Thank you. Hi, thanks. And yeah, I'm inspired to bring back to the Extinction Rebellion Seattle group some way to add to our regular process, effective way to reflect and learn from our work. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Katie Peston.
Hi. Yeah, I found it very interesting what we talked about. We also talked about Ireland, and there were 2 people from Ireland in the group. And yeah, it's interesting. It makes me want to go and look more at how XR Ireland are managing, or what's going on, because there's such a rich history in where you are. It's fascinating to see how that affects really the way the movement's working. So yeah.
England.
Thank you, Ruth. James Green.
Thanks, Marta. Reflection. Is what I'm doing in alignment with my values, goals, and agreements that I have with myself? That's what I want to do for reflection, to reflect on my actions, and that's a process that's what I'm taking away from today.
Thank you, James. Anne Paul. Who? Paul.
No, it's pole, like telephone pole. A few things really stood out for me. as a very long time activist and organizer. One was the importance of building the structure of reflection into an organization, I guess, as you're building it. I've been in organizations where people did reflection routinely, but I've also led organizations and been in them where reflection was something that didn't seem to be on anybody's agenda, which is very uncomfortable. There are a couple words that were used by people in their 1 minutes that I didn't catch. One was something entanglement, and the other is this whole notion of regenerative culture, which I'm very interested in both, but I'm like a couple other people here. I'm new, this is my first time, so I'm hoping I find out more what they mean in next sessions, because I'll definitely be back. And then the last thought was, you know, we had an interesting blend of people in our group, and people who had been leaders and also people who had been not interested to be involved for periods of time anyway, because of the way that groups function. And so that was an interesting contrast for me to hear both sides of that. Now you're muted, Marta.
Sorry, thank you, Anne. Ben Kavanagh?
Everything that James just said in his feedback, I felt the group was really nicely, kind of like in a very gentle but firm way, facilitated by Lou, and I really liked that. And I went along with the group's okayness about recording, and I thought that might affect how it was for me, but it didn't really affect how it was for me, so that was good. And I'm liking your facilitation, Marta, as well.
Thank you, Ben, that's very kind. Maureen? You're muted, Maureen.
Extinction Rebellion, Ireland, Kildare. We're actually reflecting by preparing a survey for the larger community. Our experience is that we're in a lockdown at the moment, and we're understanding from the media that children are learning how to cook from their parents. Children are learning how to grow vegetable in their gardens. Families are bonding because they have more time. It's a fact. The climate is regenerating. The air is fresher now in Newbridge than it has been for a long time. So our survey then really is to give ourselves a chance to reflect on the good experiences which we're having during the lockdown. It's positive. So from those positive experiences, we're hoping that as the lockdown fades away gradually, we'll have a mass movement ready to go to fight against business as usual. We want to use this reflective time to be ready so that our governments will not push us back into business as usual, which will not involve the protection of the environment. That's really what I would like to contribute to the meeting, and I'm grateful to Anne for her facilitation. It was good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maureen. Dean Plymouth.
Hi, Dean Plymouth. We in my group, we're a wonderful group. Every group is that I've ever experienced in this reflective learning sharing circles, or empathy campaigns. We actually were talking about new information pathways, about how some of these new information pathways that had come up actually were pretty good, like the Reset TV and some of these new learning programs. We think maybe these should carry on, and just learning to listen is sometimes one of the most important skills that a lot of us have forgotten how to do, and we are learning to listen again, which is brilliant. So I'd like to thank everyone for listening.
Thank you very much, Dean. Bill.
Well, I'm always appreciative. One of the things was important for me is how this process, I think, really lends itself to reflection. And one of the themes I really appreciated everybody going, in my circle. And one of the things that I learned is that there was a theme of how the media kind of slants things and presents things. And it was really nice to hear from people who are actually living the situation, their experiences on the ground level, individual. And it helps me with my anxiety when I see in my country the media distort things and things like that, to know, wait a minute, let's talk to the people. And when I heard from the people, I felt a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. April?
Thank you, Marta, for your gentle and vulnerable holding. And also, I just, we were talking about the way this actual structure of reflecting back people and hearing your own thoughts back kind of focuses the speaker's attention through the ears of the listeners, and it gives you a taste almost of how somebody else is hearing you and helps focus things down. And I just wanted to appreciate how, for me, silence is not just an invitation to kind of self-reflect, but is an invitation for the other than human. That might be the ancestors on your wall, or might be the tree you're leaning your back against, or the fire that you're speaking into, to have its way also with focusing where your words go. And the last reflection was on you only know that learning has actually happened when it has an influence on the actions you take. I'll leave it on that one. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm thoroughly enjoying this.
Thank you very much, April. Lou?
I think two things I'm coming away with. One is, and I feel a little bit like a broken record because I say this every week, but I'm the process of watching people listen to each other carefully and reflect each other back what they're understanding, which is, not something that happens in normal conversation. So it's not something we experience in everyday life very often. And communication patterns are difficult to change because they're pretty deeply embedded. To watch people do that is just a very beautiful thing. It's very moving to me. And so I love that. It gives me hope, and it's nourishing to me. And then the second thing is just about the empathy circle process as a structure for learning and reflecting. That in our group, several people said that, how do we incorporate learning and reflection into our groups or into our processes or into our leadership? How do we do that? And I really think that the empathy circle process is a really good tool for doing that.
Thank you, Lou. Cara?
So there were a few elements I note down during our discussion. First was changing direction in our general strategy, kind kind of focusing a little bit differently on our actions, making our actions less against, more inclusive, I would say, to the society. Focusing more on regenerative culture. So regenerative culture, so all the activists feel more supported. There is less burnout. There is less conflict, or just living the movement. And it might happen through simple things like simple facilitation adjustments when we do our meetings. What for me was the most important was what kind of choice we do during the actions. I believe that action is the way we build our community of activists, and the well-being of community is the more important effect of our actions, not the effect on politicians, but the well-being of community that participates in this action. So I would like to recall empathic direct action. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. Edwin.
Yeah, what stood out for me is sort of this exploration of the nature of reflection, and it's sort of a way of growing and learning, and the empathy is a form of reflection. So that's something that kind of stood out for me. And the empathy circle too is sort of a reflection circle. You can actually call it a reflection circle, perhaps. A reflection pool, maybe another term for it. And there was also by being reflected, there was as an individual that for myself, and I think for others too, is we feel grounded, we feel centered, and there's a certain beauty, feeling of beauty to it. And then there's the reflection of others, sort of as individuals, and something that came up is maybe as a facilitator, so you're reflecting a group. And that there's also reflecting of the whole of society, maybe XR sort of trying to reflect to society so that the society can grow. And I noticed Stu's little mirror, he's got a little mirror at the corner of his screen. And so I revealed my mirror here, so which I usually hide. So I showed my mirror so you see another side of myself. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Edwin. Have I missed anyone, or is it just me? Okay. So for me, it's this message of, we spoke of relearning or unlearning things. And for me, I'm taking away that unlearning is forgetting about the things that I've learned might not be useful. I might have to build on it to learn better. But that by unlearning, I'd be denying previous learning, and that would probably not be a good thing. So, and with that, I really appreciate everyone that's joined us today. Apologies for going over a tiny bit. Next week, we meet again on Principle 6. We welcome everyone and every part of everyone. So bring yourselves and bring everyone else that you can think of. And there's the Empathy Circles work group, Facebook group, where we have all the other events as well, and other cafes that you're very welcome to. And I don't know, Edwin, if there's anything else you'd like to add.
I just put the link to the work group, and there was also the Google Doc if people want to leave their contact info just to connect with each other. So that's kind of it. And we're also doing trainings coming up. There's some trainings that Lou and there's several of them that if you're wanting to become an Empathy Circle facilitator, the way to become a facilitator is do 2 or 3 and then, you know, take a facilitator training, and we're kind of scaling those up. And we hope you'll start facilitating empathy circles in your own XR group, in your own community, in your families, and sort of spread the practice. Yeah. Thanks. And thanks for facilitating so beautifully, Martha.
Yes, so if facilitators, please, if you can stay behind, and we'll have a little debrief, because we'll do our own reflecting and learning, so we do it better next time. It's lovely having you all. See you soon.
Bye everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, thank you. See you next week.